Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Falcons Central Radio Show on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am Aaron Freeman, founder of FalFans.com, joined as always by my good friend of Scott Karasik, writer for the Bleach Report. This week we are going to be talking about the Scouting Combine, just finished up the other day. We will give our thoughts on some of the players that we thought stood out. We'll also talk a little bit about some of the free agent rumors that emerged from the Combine, as they always do. We will then answer a bunch of mailbag questions because we got like a million of them, and we appreciate everybody who sent those in this week. But first, we want to start this show talking a little bit about the Falcons news that emerged today. The Falcons gave contract extensions, I should put that in air quotes, to Cliff Matthews and Patrick DiMarco, and they also signed a wide receiver, Nick Williams. So, Scott, let's jump in a little bit and talk about those moves. What are your thoughts on the contract extensions, which basically, as I understand it, is basically two guys that were about to be free agents that got re-signed before free agency? So technically, it's a contract extension on Cliff Matthews and Patrick DiMarco.
Um, I mean, backup caliber players who signed probably backup caliber contracts at veteran minimum and will have starting quality competition to beat in order to make the roster. So, if DeMarco is back on the roster, he's the starting fullback. If Cliff Matthews is back on the roster, he's going to actually play. He's not going to just sit on the bench and do nothing. So, I mean, the way I look at it right now, Cliff Matthews is the backup base end behind Malachi Goodman. That's his role. That's where he fits. You got Goodman, you got Matthews. I think right now, the way it sits right now, you've got Hageman and Tyson Jackson at 3-tech. You got Soliai and what's the other guy's name?
Corey Peterson?
No. I'm just going with guys who are under contract right now. They've got some big Ricky Haivuli from Mali or something like that.
Forgot about that guy.
He's there, and then Jonathan Babineau. Sorry, Babineau and Hageman at 3, and then at 1-tech it's Soliai Jackson and Ricky Haimuli. And then at the wide end, you've got at the Leo right now, you've got Massaquoi Mapanga.
Okay.
Right now. That will change very soon, but that's what we're looking at right now. So you've got depth. You've got a 2 deep that actually played in snaps some snaps last year for your front 4. Going into free agency, that's not a bad way to go. Because last year's starters could be next year's backups, and that's what we call a good situation. And you've got backups with starting, experience. Starting ability, starting experience.
Okay. I was curious if you thought Cliff Matthews would basically kick out to defensive end or if he would stay at defensive tackle. I do think, I agree with you, I think he does probably line up at that 5 technique-based defensive end, at left defensive end, behind Goodman. I think he competes there. I think the good thing about Matthews is he can kind of be, if he's your 8th or 9th guy in your defensive line rotation, you're fine with that. If he's like the 5th or 6th guy, then you got problems. But like if he's like the last guy that you activate for 12 games a year, you play some special teams, he gives you 15 to 20 snaps a game, no problem with that. So I do think as far as that goes, he's basically a camp body. It's the same situation he was in last year, where he was basically a camp body. He played pretty well in training camp in the preseason last year. I thought he actually had a better preseason than Rashid Hageman last summer. And if he plays at that level, going against third stringers or whatever, and beats up some third string guards, then sure, by all means, he can make the roster. But it's by no means he's on the bubble, and I get why he re-signed the contract. He's not going to get no one's going to sign him to some lucrative 2 or 3 year deal. He might as well stick in Atlanta. That's his best chances of making the roster. I think the same thing is for DiMarco. But I was curious, what are your thoughts on the wide receiver we signed, Nick Williams? You know, he's kind of a smaller slot type of receiver. Um, Played a lot of special teams at UConn. Do you see him, basically competing for that? If they don't re-sign someone like Weems, he's basically competing for that wide receiver 5 spot, where basically the best he can hope for is a gunner on special teams.
He's, I mean, yeah, basically that sixth wide receiver spot. I mean, I'm not like, to me that's the same as the Tim Toon signing. If he makes the roster, it's because he made it by some miracle, and then he's gonna like be some 53rd man on the or 45th man on the roster because he's a special teams guy, and that's why he's making the team. You know, his best case right now is Drew Davis.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I don't see any real spot for him on the roster other than winning that final spot. Unless, Bernard Reedy loses it or Freddie Martino loses it. But I would say I would even give them a leg up just because they've played with Matt Ryan before. Even though it's a brand new scheme, they've played with Ryan before. So yeah, that's just my view there. I mean, like it's some cheap, basically pointless signings. It's adding depth before you get to free agency, which isn't always a bad thing. They did the same thing with Lofa Tupu. They did the same thing with Vince Monowai. A couple years back, they just brought him in, had guys there to where it could be like, hey guys, look, at least we've got competition for these starting spots. And then the competitions worked out, and they wound up cutting both of them because they got guys better than them. It's going to be the same kind of thing here. Maybe not for DiMarco, unless they sign like a Charles Clay. I'm not seeing DiMarco get cut because fullbacks are cheap. Unless you have a guy who just balls out in camp, you're not going to beat the guy that you got incumbent and entering his third season in the NFL. And DiMarco signed a really cheap contract because he was an exclusive rights free agent. It was either sign with Atlanta or don't sign with the team. That was his option. So, of course, he re-signed with Atlanta. And the same thing happened with Cliff Matthews. He was facing basically the same thing because no one wants Cliff Matthews. He's roster fringe. Like, as harsh as that is to say, like, a lot of teams around the NFL just consider him a guy. A special teamer. He's nothing special. He's just a guy. He's a roster filler until you find someone better that can take his spot. So...
Yeah, I would kind of think Nick Williams, you could compare him to the Jeremy Ebert signing last year,
yeah.
Where he's a guy that can, maybe push for a job in preseason, maybe potentially be a practice squad guy, and that's kind of what you're hoping for. You're hoping that the Falcons are going to draft a wide receiver for like the first time in, I don't know, forever, it seems like, and maybe they'll sign a low-level free agent or whatever that kind of bolster that position in camp. But I kind of agree with you basically on those sorts of moves. You need 90 guys in camp. You got 3 more, so we got what, not including the draft picks, but like 30 more guys to sign this offseason. So
yeah, it's 90 camp spots. Atlanta has 55 guys on the roster right now. Add in 8 draft picks, you're at 63. There's 3 guys that are pretty much guaranteed to get cut from what I'm hearing around the league, rumors. Steven Jackson, gone. Sam Baker, he may not be like a right now cut, but he's going to be cut. I mean, like, straight up going to be cut because they either want him to retire or he's gone. And then the third one, which not a lot of people are going to be happy about. You might be happy about it, but the third one is Harry Douglas.
Okay.
And even he's like a 50-50, but the first 2, gone. Straight up gone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Harry Douglas, there's rumor that he's getting traded as opposed to getting cut.
I'd like to see the team that's going to trade for a 30-year-old wide receiver who's slow.
6th-round pick.
I'll take it. I'll take anything for Harry Douglas. I'll take a conditional 7th-round pick.
Well, he's got some value around the league just because he's a veteran. He's savvy. He understands how to actually run routes. He's a leader within his position group. Like, people like him, so it's possible. It's possible.
I think Harry Douglas at this point in his career is like Nate Burleson in Detroit. Because because you don't have better options, he's fine. But you're not sitting there like, oh man, I'm so happy that we're putting Nate Burleson across from Calvin Johnson. That's working so well with the Lions because obviously they drafted guys like Titus Young and Ryan Broyles, and then went out and signed Golden Tate last year. But hey, if that's somebody else's problem, then more power to the Falcons. Basically like the reverse of the Laurent Robinson trade. So I'll take it.
Yeah, basically.
All right, Scott, let's talk about the Combine. We got a million mailbag questions, so we apologize in advance if we seem like we're rushing through this, but, we don't want this to be a 2-hour show. So, there was a lot of – let's talk a little bit about free agency before we get into some of the guys that we thought stood out. There were a lot of rumors that emerged from the weekend. Usually that's the case because you get media guys and agents in the same building, and people talk. This used to be the time of the year where tampering used to occur, I guess we could say.
It still does.
Yeah, it still does. It's not as bad now because they have that 3-day period before free agency where you can negotiate. Yeah, but
well, let's not BS things.
Yeah.
Every NFL team, every NFL agent, every NFL player tampers. Yeah. It's whether or not you get caught as to whether you lose those draft picks, and whether or not it's egregious enough. It's basically you can like say, hey, I know my guy on the open market's going to get this, and when they go, well, how'd you know? You can just go, I've got friends who work for these teams. I've got friends who work for this private organization that has given me ideas on the market value of each player. Or I've hired an outside marketing resource, aka I called my buddy with the Raiders. Or I called my buddy with the Vikings and said, what would this guy get? What would that guy get? So a lot of these rumors are put out by agents. Let's not BS this one. A lot of them are put out by agents.
Let's say 90% of all rumors about players are put out by agents. When you see guys tweeting on Twitter saying, sources tell me, it's an agent. That's basically what sources is agents, 90% of the time.
Yeah.
So, some of these rumors, Justin Forsett with the Ravens, let's talk a little bit about whether or not you think the Falcons signing 29, 30-year-old Forsett, who's coming off his best season, had a great season in Baltimore last year. I don't think anybody can deny that. But do you think he's more of a backup type of dude that he's been for most of his career, a one-year wonder, or do you really think he's a legitimate potential starter?
Justin Forsett signing with Atlanta, unless it's for like 1 year and, at absolute most, $1 million, I'm not doing it. I don't think Atlanta's doing it. I think he's smoke.
Yeah, this rumor really surprised me. Like, I know Forsett has some familiarity with him from their shared days in Seattle. But it's one of those situations where it's like, I just don't see, like, unless you can get Forsett for real cheap, like what you just said, like, it just doesn't make any sense. We've been down this road of older, declining running backs, and basically Forsett's basically played like 6-7 years in the NFL and basically been, I thought he was underrated for a large portion of his career. And so what he did this season wasn't exactly a surprise that he got the opportunity that he got, but essentially he's not a lead running back. He's not that number one guy at least reliably speaking, for moving forward. I think the Falcons could do a lot better. It's a deep running back class in the draft. It's one of the best running back classes we've had probably since that '08 class. So to me, it makes really no sense for the Falcons to go out and sign almost a 30-year-old running back instead of drafting one of these guys, especially when Forsett is basically, at best, he's a rich man's Devontae Freeman, and probably the reality is him and Freeman, are about the same, except for Forsett's probably got slightly better long speed, but I don't see why you would sign Forsett when you already have Freeman.
Yeah, basically. Honestly, I wouldn't draft Forsett, period. All right, not draft. I wouldn't sign Forsett, period, unless he was taking that veteran minimum deal.
Yeah.
I can count, 14 running backs in this year's draft that I would take over Justin Forsett. 14.
Yeah. Yeah.
That gets me through like 5 rounds.
Yeah. But I can't dispute it. I wish I could. Normally, Scott, we argue about these things, but no, I think you're right. You're dead on about that.
And then there's a bunch of guys that I wouldn't take that are still decent backs that I could see the Falcons liking, like T.J. Yeldon. I don't think he's very good, but I could see the Falcons falling in love with him. Or Tyler Varga. He may not be better than Justin Forsett now, but he's going to be better long term.
Yeah. I think you could probably make the argument that Forsett, when he came out, and Yeldon, even if you don't like Yeldon, I don't think you'll sit there and say, yeah, Forsett was a way better prospect than Yeldon was. So, yeah, I agree with you. The other big rumor was Broncos tight end Julius Thomas. I've gotten a lot of people asking me about should the Falcons sign Julius Thomas and how much would you pay for him. Scott, I'm curious what your thoughts on signing Julius Thomas is.
If Atlanta can sign Julius Thomas wants to come to Atlanta, and he'll sign a deal similar to what Tony Gonzalez signed, that 3-year, $22 million deal. Do it in a heartbeat.
Okay. I'm a similar vein, Scott. I think Julius Thomas. I think there's no denying Julius Thomas is a good player. He's one of the better tight ends in the NFL. I just kind of have a hard time reconciling the notion. I'm looking at where I think Julius Thomas is going to get paid. I think he's going to be one of the 3 highest paid tight ends in the NFL, which means he's going to make like $9 million a year and probably $20 million guaranteed. And I certainly won't sit here and say that he doesn't deserve that sort of money, because you can make the argument he's one of the 3 best tight ends in the NFL. But I don't see as a great fit in Atlanta. Like, if you're signing Julius Thomas, you're signing him because you want to throw the football. And with the Falcons, they're gonna want to be a little bit more balanced offense, and I don't see why you would pay $40 or $50 million to Julius Thomas when you want to be a more balanced offense. Now, if you want to keep throwing the football and you want to have that second fiddle to Julio Jones, and you want Matt Ryan to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game, then by all means sign Julius Thomas. But if you want to, have a running back that runs the ball a lot, then I don't know why spending that money on a tight end makes a lot of sense, especially a tight end who's not a great blocker.
Honestly, when you look at all these offenses that Kyle Shanahan has run, you go back and you look at all the different tight ends he's used, one thing I've noticed is a lot of them don't have reputations for being great blockers. Jordan Reed, Owen Daniels, Jordan Cameron, just looking through, outside of Chris Cooley, I don't think I count one tight end who really had a great, one number 1 tight end for him that had a great, blocking reputation.
It's a fair point.
And even then, Chris Cooley wasn't really a tight end in the offense. He was more that fullback, H-back, move role, which is why I think Charles Clay is going to be a big target too, and no one's mentioning it. If Clay gets to the market, I could see Atlanta bringing him in, and I'd be perfectly happy with that. But they don't need this amazing blocking tight end. They need a guy who understands how to cut block. They need a guy who understands the zone scheme and can play in the zone scheme efficiently, which Julius Thomas can, by the way. He's not a great blocker, but he's effective enough to get in the damn way. And at times, that's all you need.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right, Scott. I'm not trying to sit here and say that, Julius Thomas wouldn't more than make up for his lack of blocking ability with his receiving ability. I don't think it's necessarily that the Falcons need to get the world's greatest blocking tight end. But, spending $40 million on a tight end is a lot of money for a tight end. It's basically the equivalent of spending, 60 or 70 million on a wide receiver. And so it's basically like signing Mike Wallace. And so if you're gonna sign Mike Wallace, then you need to throw the football. You need to throw the football deep. And I don't necessarily know if Kyle Shanahan's offense is really geared to maximize a player like Julius Thomas. If you're gonna spend that money. Now, if you're gonna spend that money and you're gonna throw the ball a lot, then by all means make the move. You're not gonna find a better option than Julius Thomas.
Well, let's put it this way: Julius Thomas isn't a bad blocker either. He may have a reputation as a bad blocker, but I know going back and watching the film, I go, he's serviceable. He's average. He's okay. He's not bad. And then when I like using Pro Football Focus as a check, just to make sure I'm not like completely crazy. And they have him at literally average, plus 0.1 as a run blocker. That's exactly where he should be. If you want a blocker, go out and sign Virgil Green, but then you're getting nothing in the passing game. If you want to, honestly, if you can get both Julius Thomas and Virgil Green, you just do that, and then have Toy Lolo come in on 3 tight end sets and run all 3 of them together. It's not like they haven't been playing in a zone blocking scheme out in Denver for the past 4 years together.
On to another free agent, a player that everybody's in the dots since he was hired. Seems like the Falcons. Here are some of the rumors that are coming out of cornerback Byron Scott on that possibility might be a big somebody to him, going to Philadelphia. They like those physical press corners. I've also heard Seahawks, their number 1 priority recently this offseason. So it doesn't seem like if the Falcons are going to steal Byron Maxwell from Seattle, steal him from Philadelphia, it's probably not going to be at a price. So what are your thoughts?
I don't think they're going to bring in Byron Maxwell. I think it's dot connecting. It's, oh, hey, Atlanta had a 32nd ranked pass defense. Oh, hey, Dan Quinn's going to Atlanta. Oh, hey, Byron Maxwell's a free agent. Boom, let's connect the dots. Instead of, Atlanta's got a really good corner in Desmond Trufant and another really good corner talent-wise in Robert Alford. You put them in Quinn's scheme, you let them press, you let them do everything they're good at. Why would you need Byron Maxwell? Especially since you know the market inefficiency on tall corners and how to beat how to beat the system and get the cornerbacks that you really want, like they did in Seattle. I'd rather draft Nick Marshall in the 5th round, or go out and sign someone like Walter Thurman and then draft Nick Marshall in the 3rd round, or not 3rd round, in the 5th round, and use that. It makes so much more sense. Walter Thurman as your nickel, Nick Marshall as your developmental guy, and build the team. Don't go out and get Byron Maxwell. It's a waste of money. You don't need a number 2 corner that bad. Walter Thurman can do the 3rd corner role for a quarter of the price. Probably an eighth of the price if Byron Maxwell's getting the numbers I'm hearing. around $8 million a year.
Nothing to add. You're dead on. I think Max. I look at Max, a solid number you would have in that system based off of what I'm also hearing. You would basically have to finding the most expensive nickel cornerback. So, I think the Falcons upgrade their nickel cornerback play. But I don't know if they need to wind up getting those. So, yeah. This guy we're going to talk about, Scott, going to be on him than I am, but it's not this guy. But rumors that Pernell Fee, defensive end / tackle / linebacker / I don't know, he might even some free safety for the Ravens a couple of years, is also on the Falcons' radar as a potential will be in this offseason. Look at major pass a couple episodes with these guys. I think a lot of those not make it to the market. And so a guy like McPhee may be able to do a little bit. And the question,
I think McPhee's a great fit for Atlanta. I think if you want a guy who's going to be that Michael Bennett role, step right in, get it taken care of, have one of your top 2 pass rushers guaranteed, you go out and you get Pernell McPhee. You make sure he's on the roster, and you just get Pernell McPhee, question mark, profit. Like, just, yeah, I think he's the guy on the market for Atlanta. And if he's out there and it costs you $8 million a year, you pay him $8 million a year. It's all about structure, though. You're not going to pay him $8 million, $9 million the first 3 years at all. So.
he probably is fit for that Michael Bennett role. I have a question on whether he's able to fill it quite as capably as in it. Reasons why I'm going to agree with you a little bit on the price tag for McPhee is I don't think he's quite as proven. Doesn't think he can be a good player in the scheme and blossom into this 8 to 10 sack guy. I think he's capable of being that guy, but I don't know if I would pay him now because I don't think he's proven. He's a guy who had 17 sacks and that works out to be about sacks a year. He's never been a. I don't know if he has that edge speed of the pocket and kicking the tackle technique in nickel situation, but I don't know if I would pay a super premium for a guy who the 30 or 40 game every down. But that's
I mean, I can understand why you'd be apprehensive just because he hasn't been playing more than 60% of the snaps. He hadn't been playing more than 50% of the snaps. But I think if anyone can make that step, that move up to that 65%, that 70% a game in snaps, I think it's McPhee. He hasn't taken the beatings that a lot of these guys do early in their career. I mean, I like him. I just think you're underselling him and his ability to do that. Yeah, he hasn't had a lot of sacks every year because he is that third guy in the rotation, that fourth guy in the rotation. Ideally, I would put Pernell McPhee at number 2 on my overall list just because I think if JPP is available, you go out and get him instead. But it's looking like he's getting franchised. It looks like Justin Houston, I haven't even put him on my list because I knew he was getting franchised. So, I mean, he's the best guy out there. Yeah, you could get Jerry Hughes, who started. Yeah, you could get, Brandon Graham, but Brandon Graham's the same kind of situation as McPhee. Honestly, I think if you get McPhee and Graham and you say, hey guys, just play motivated like Averill and what was the other guy? Averill and Michael Bennett, they'd be ecstatic.
Okay. All right, let's move. All right. To this one. The Jets. McClure, I believe, suggested that the Falcons would pay him this veteran, 30 at this point, for maybe add some. What are your thoughts on him?
That's one coming from David Harris's agent as he goes. He's going, oh hey, look, Paul Warlow's not very good in my opinion, so that's where Atlanta should go. Atlanta should sign my guy. He was leaking stuff out before the Falcons went out and got, or before the head coaching change, where Atlanta went out and got Dan Quinn, and then he was saying, yeah, David Harris is going to go to Atlanta if Rex Ryan's there. So, no. Yeah. That's coming straight from an agent.
The combine is that the Falcons haven't really approached Dwight Lowry for coming back. So I guess my question, Scott, is are interested in bringing back, or is that we've heard throughout this weekend is that the Falcons haven't been assessing their roster and basically made that decision yet. So I'm curious what that's about.
Let's just say it's not out of the realm of possibilities for Tyson Jackson to get cut. And let's just say that if he does get cut, it's not out of the realm of possibilities for Corey Peters to get brought back as the starting protector. Yeah, I'm just a couple of things, and I would love to see Dwight Lowery come back and just have Lowery and Desmond Salvord and be like, you know what, our free safety situation's good. Because I think Lowery can play that deep safety and be okay at it. And I think worst case scenario, you've got Desmond Salvord learning the position, and I think he could explode.
I agree, but it's fine. It won't be the first time on somebody. Let's talk a little bit about these edge rushers. I think take an edge rusher at the top one. Some of these guys in the we probably started a drinking game about how many times we're going to mention. So I guess Scott stacked the board now with there's 5 guys need a draft pick. Don, Gregory, Shane, and Alvin.
I think Fowler by far is the best on the field in terms of film that I've seen. Beasley's right behind him. Love Vic Beasley. Great player. Love Dante Fowler. Great player. 2 completely different guys, though. If I had to compare them, I would say Fowler is a Justin Houston type. Very similar kind of player. He doesn't have the same kind of measurables in the 3-cone, but everything else is looking about on par. Where Vic Beasley is more Von Miller. He's not as straight line fast, long speed. He's not like a 4.46 guy the way Von Miller is. But everything else, right on pace, right there with Vaughn. Intelligent, team leader. Vic Beasley's better off the field than Von Miller is. He's not going to get into trouble. He's not going to do the stupid stuff that Von Miller was doing off the field. And he's a team captain, which I know some fans out there think is crazy that Atlanta invests in team captains because team captains know what it's like to both follow and lead. And people don't understand that concept that you want a guy who's going to buy into the team concept. And who else buys into a team concept? A team captain. That's why he's the friggin' captain. So Beasley, Dupree, Fowler, all three of them were captains. All three of them are team players. All three of them are known as coachable. Those would be my top three at this position. Randy Gregory would be fourth. Shane Ray, I have sixth. I don't like Shane Ray at all compared to the other five ahead of him. Like, if I had a choice between the other five and Shane Ray, I'm not taking Shane Ray. Especially not at 8. And I've had multiple scouts confirm my thoughts that he's just not a good option in the top 10. They've straight up told me, hey, no, this guy is a late first, early second round guy. I'd be shocked if he goes in the first round with how deep this edge class is. He's explosive, but that's all he is. So.
I go with
Portland's Robert Mathis.
Okay. I'm with you. I back the board the same way. I'm a Shane Ray fan. Is what it is, and it wouldn't. Falcons took him in. I all are in are the best players on the. I think Greg has probably the most of anybody in this class. You know, of physical tools, but I was quite there yet with Fowler and the player. I don't necessarily see him as being a big rusher in the NFL, but I could be wrong about that. He said the same thing about and look turned out so. Okay, Scott. Other players did you think? Let's go position. A little bit about some of the runners. I noticed Amir Abdullah. Falcons love a 3-cone jersey. 7'9" and 3-cone. So does that mean he's the number one? Shoots to number one draft board.
I've had him as one of my top 3 running backs just based on film grade. I really like Amir Abdullah. I've given 3 running backs first round grades. I've got Todd Gurley, I've got Melvin Gordon, and I've got Amir Abdullah. I mean, it's just the only thing he can't do right now is pass block. And I'm okay with that. The only problem with Amir Abdullah is he's the exact same guy as Devontae Freeman if you add a little bit more speed to Freeman. So there's no variation in your running back there. There's no power, no speed, you've got 3 speed backs in that case. You need a power back later in the draft if you take Amir Abdullah. But I like him, and I wouldn't be shocked if Atlanta took him early. The only other running back that I could see them taking early, though, and he didn't post a great 3-cone time, but he posted a good long speed, good 40, is Jeremy Langford. And he's built more like that, power, give him 250 carries a year back that you're wanting. And that's Jeremy Langford, Michigan State, really good back, really good vision. Anywhere between, probably going to be a 1,300-yard back if you give him 250 to 275 carries.
I'll do that. haven't watched as much tape you have on so we'll go with that. Let's move on to your position. I've been harping on for 3 Falcons to draft, but big talk about guys at the Kevin White or Devontae Parker, sort of had that 40 time, the 4-3-5. Cooper had a good time. Cooper had a good time. Guys are options as a B plan C option.
I mean, I would gladly take Amari Cooper that high just based on grade and based on 40, based on everything else. He's Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, I like all 3. They're all going to be all 3 great NFL receivers. I've said more in the show. I just don't believe the Falcons should be drafting wide receiver that high at all in the first round, unless I've said it. Unless you have for a number 1 receiver, basically one away from a Super Bowl team. The Falcons aren't good to take a wide receiver. They just do anything. If good offensive line and you good wide receivers don't really mean basically a player position where everything else needs to go right for it to be effective. Add a whole lot to a football, but that's my. I know that's not a problem because fantasy football. So, tight end position. That as a wide receiver, a split on whether he's a wide right in the NFL, but like some of the guys who split, Max seems like to be clear-cut number 1. Clive, a pretty sort of Max in sort of categories, slouch. So you said it before the show, Walford worth the second round. Do you today?
Walford hurt himself with a poor time at the combine, but he's an excellent tight end on film. He looked explosive at the Senior Bowl. He just didn't time well. And some guys just don't time well. Max Williams, just excellent player. Again, did not time well. And Nick O'Leary, don't get me started on him. His arm length is, I might have longer arms and bigger hands than him. And he's a good 8 inches taller than me. Like that's, you think Sam Baker has short arms? This guy's got friggin' stubs. And I apologize to any of our listeners who do have stubs. I'm just saying that Nick O'Leary has tiny arms. I wouldn't. Unless I'm getting Max Williams at the top of the second, Clive Walford at the top of the third, I'm not taking a tight end in this year's class. Not a single one of them's worth it. Unless you go and consider Darren Waller or Devin Funchess tight ends as that move F spot, then you gladly take them. But Funchess in the top of the third, Waller at like the top of the fifth, top of the sixth.
All right. No, this is another one of your big. Pimping him for the last couple weeks, but Hobart's own Alan Marpet. The question is, can Marpet play offensive guard?
Yeah, I don't understand why people are calling him a center. He's never played center in his life. He's only ever played left tackle in college or left guard in college. That's it. That's all he's ever played. They ran his own blocking scheme at Hobart. He knows his own blocking scheme. He knows the tackle and the guard rule. He's excellent in pass protection. Bring him in. I'd spend a second-round pick on the guy, personally. if Atlanta can get him at the top of the third, they've just picked the best guard in the class. They picked their next 10-year starter at left guard, and they can probably cut Justin Blaylock and spend that money elsewhere.
Okay.
And that'd be one of those surprise final cut situations.
You know, just when have I ever the Falcons making decisions, roster decisions? Defensive linemen, like to me, everybody was talking a lot about Leonard Williams but anybody on your to me, draft class of defensive linemen, if we're talking edge rushers, seems to be that it's all undersized, edge rusher and nose tackles. Is there any there caught your eye?
The only name that really caught my eye was Ellis McCarthy out of UCLA. There's like 4 guys from UCLA that I would gladly draft if I'm Atlanta. And the only reason why McCarthy caught my eye is he scored over a .9 on my explosion score, which is ridiculous. And another guy was Rakeem Nunez-Roches out of Southern Mississippi, another guy who scored over .9 on the explosion score. All that means is that they have 9/10 of a horse's power coming from their legs. Ridiculous athletes for 338 pounds or 307 pounds. And I would only take them to play interior, that nose position, and rotate. Because Nunez-Roches, his potential ceiling is Brandon Mabane. His floor is out of the league, not ever playing again. But his ceiling is really high. Where McCarthy is more of just that big fat body in the middle. His high is probably Paul Soliai at his best. Not a pass rusher, just a big fat body who takes up blockers and eats a double team. But no.
What about the line? Okay. Scott. Got you that stood out to you?
There we go. Sorry, you kind of froze for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, so linebackers that stood out. A lot of them stood out in the drills, but they didn't stand out as with their times. Loved what Shaq Thompson did in his drills, but he didn't time great. Although he did have a good 3-cone, so that keeps him in the running for the Falcons. And then, Eric Kendricks, if he doesn't hurt his leg in the 40, we actually get to see his 3-cone in his shuttle. He's gonna kill it in the 3-cone in the shuttle when he gets back home to UCLA. Again, UCLA, another prospect who really stood out to me, Eric Kendricks. I mean, and then a surprise that I didn't think he was going to run this fast is Stephon Anthony out of Clemson. His tape suggests mid-third, early third-round pick. His combine numbers suggest first-round pick. So he moved up quite a bit for me. I really like it. If Atlanta can get him at the top of the third, so say they go pass rusher, get Todd Gurley, then go Stephon Anthony, I'd be ecstatic.
Next, we talked a little about Eric Rowe. He's a very combine. Besides him, anybody else talk about Eric? Who as the secondary?
I like Eric Rowe. He reminds me a lot of Eric Weddle, where he didn't have the best film in college. He didn't have the right role. He was playing a lot more corner, and he's more of a safety projection. So as long as an NFL team ends up putting him at safety, it makes sense.
Okay. All right, Scott. You got any last combos? Do you want to get in these?
I just want to go over what my explosion score really is. Just because I've been doing it since the 2009 draft, and I think it's a neat aspect of it. A lot of guys do these things called math rushers. My friend Justice Mosquita, I'll try and get him on for a show. He goes over a lot of the metric-y type stuff. So, and as part of his math rushers, he's started to incorporate a couple of the formulas that he's modified my explosion formula and changed it a little bit for his stuff. But he's awesome. It's basically vertical 10-yard split in weight. All you need. You get the explosion score, and it converts directly into horsepower. Guys like Bud Dupree. Bud is one of 8 guys ever to have over 1 horsepower register on the scale. That's ridiculous. That means he's literally more explosive than a horse. Like a horse. A friggin' horse. He's more explosive than. That's ridiculous. Vic Beasley, 0.96 horsepower. Out of a 246-pound frame, that's insane. That's ridiculous. He shouldn't be able to generate that much power. Like, you know when you see a linebacker come in and just blow someone up? That's what Beasley can do. Fresh off the line. Blow someone up. So, I mean, just those 2 guys alone had ridiculous numbers. And then there's another guy who I'm going to say this name once, and don't ask me to say it again. Owamagbe Odigizua out of University of California, Los Angeles. Again, UCLA popping up on my metrics again. 0.97 on the explosion score. Ridiculous. 97% of a horsepower. Ridiculous. If Atlanta gets any of those 3 guys, I'm going to be convinced that over the past 2 years they've been using similar metrics. Because last year they got Desmond Salward, who scored ridiculously on it. They got Jake Matthews, who scored ridiculously well on it. And Rashid Hageman, who almost got a full horsepower himself. Mr. I don't think he can pass rush, Aaron.
Okay. We'll see. All right. Some of the guys that have best on your scores. Give people an idea of the guys who are sort of off.
All right. So examples of guys who scored really high. The 1 horsepower club is Nick Perry, Dante Mock, Michael Johnson when he was at Georgia Tech, Jamie Collins from Southern Mississippi, who is now destroying people in the NFL, Jared Cook, Virgil Green, and Glenn Foster. And when Glenn Foster is healthy, he's a really good player. Then you got Donald Stevenson, who, when he plays for Kansas City, is good. Brian Arakpo, who's one of your, if he's healthy, he's awesome players. Connor Barwin, J.J. Watt, Jimmy Graham, like Sebastian Vollmer, and Ndamukong Suh, Teron Armstead, Khalil Mack, Jadeveon Clowney. A lot of these guys are registered really high, above 0.95. B.J. Raji. And then Rashid Hageman. Oh, look, 0.95. The end of the 0.95 club. Rashid Hagan.
Okay. Well, so hear Scott talk about that. You kind of have an idea what he's talking about. But we got like 10,000 mailbag questions, so let's jump into the first one comes at Hitman J. If we in Houston, Nick will draft.
What part of Justin Houston is getting franchised? Justin Houston will not hit the market because Kansas City will either sign him to a big deal or he's just not going to be available. Like, he's not going to be available, Falcons fans. Kansas City is not full of stupid imbeciles running their front office. They're not going to let Justin Houston leave. He's 26, has no injury history. Like, his off-field was one incident right before the combine when he got caught smoking weed. That's it. Like, the dude's the captain there. They're not letting him go. If his next contract isn't 9 figures, I would be absolutely stunned. My mind would be blown.
Yeah, Matt Ryan not being Buccaneers or something. Jay, not gonna happen. Can the Falcons score? Possibly, but with there's just no. It's not gonna be. They tag him up to #1 picks for him. It's just not gonna happen. It's going to be achieved. He becomes a Falcon. They tag him. He holds it. He tears his Achilles training camp. D Ford has 50 here, and hey, instead of Justin Houston at 9 figure, we'll just maybe, and all those things happen. The Falcons would start a 2. So there's your dream. Hope Justin Houston, something terrible happens, and I hope that happens. So that's about it. Marco saw Mike's article about the debacle and when we expect to see the roster cuts.
Mike Florio's information is gotten by him wearing a team's jacket and acting like he's part of a staff somewhere. We saw it at the Senior Bowl. He's not exactly known for his, how do I put this? His integrity. It doesn't exist. So, yeah. His information is coming from teams speculating, not from the league. Until the league actually comes out and gives Atlanta their punishment, let's wait. I'll put it that way. Because I've heard it's probably a 5th-round pick. He's putting out there, oh, they're going to lose a 2nd or a 3rd. It's probably a 5th-round pick. And it's probably $1 million fine.
David V. From No, the team force.
When the nice part about having 8 picks is you can lose one of them and decide on draft day if you want to trade back or not. If you lose a 2nd-round pick, it sucks. It really does. But you don't trade back unless the guy you don't want at 8 is gone. Like, if you've got a guy you want at 8, say Vic Beasley, Dante Fowler, Randy Gregory, Bud Dupree, all of them are gone, then you trade back. Other than that situation, it's not worth it. Stay where you're at, get your guy, because that's more important.
All right. Don't have any, so we'll move on to the question. Mac Daddy Senior, love the Twitter handle. If the Falcons of Harry, do you get a guy draft or free agency?
Considering this draft is full of guys who are good, number 2, number 3 guys at best, just take one in the draft. You can get a guy in like the 4th or 5th round, like a Chris Conley, and develop him. Do it. Conley's that insane athlete that has the potential to explode, but his film in college sucked compared to a lot of the guys in the class. Like, you look at his film and you go, man, I'm sorry he had Hudson Mason throwing him the ball. Or, man, I'm sorry he had Aaron Murray throwing him. I like Aaron Murray as a backup in the pros, but there's a reason why the guy went in the 6th round. There's a reason why Hudson Mason is not going to get drafted. Neither one of those guys has a long NFL starting career that we're going to be expecting out of them. I'm just going to put it that way.
I'm right. You have Roddy at the age of 30. You have Harry 30. You have over the age of 30. Young guys. It's a good guys. I don't know if it's quite as good as last year's, but it's not like far off. So why would you draft somebody? Whether it's the 4th round, 5th round, whatever the case may be, get somebody young and develop them. You can do that. So I'm for it. Orgon asks, do you identify any project to improve new staff to coach scheme?
Aaron may not love this choice, but I'm going with Jonathan Massaquoi. I think with good coaching, with a coach that actually understands him and gets him. Cliff Averill had a very similar situation before he went to Seattle and met Dan Quinn. And then he went and he exploded. Maybe not in terms of sacks, but in terms of just everything. He exploded. He's been a model citizen. They love him there. I think he could do the same thing with Massaquoi. And I think he might see that. But I still think they go out and they get a free agent pass rusher. I still think they draft one at 8. And I think they run a 3-man rotation, which isn't a bad thing. If you have 3, 4 guys that you can run, and you can have, fresh pass rushers, fresh athletes going after these offensive tackles in the NFL, at a 50-50 rotation in each spot, all you're going to do is piss off the offensive linemen because they're like, God damn, these guys are always fresh. You're going to tire out the offensive linemen, and by the time the crucial part of the game comes, that 3rd, 4th quarter, you're going to start racking up the sacks. It may not be pretty. It may not be these quick jump off the ball, John Abraham type sacks where you bend the edge perfectly, but you're going to get something. And you're going to create a lot of pressure, especially with Brian Cox focusing on one style of defensive line. So I think a lot of these players are going to improve. I think one big thing that Dan Quinn's going to continue in Atlanta is MMA training for hand usage.
Sheet Hageman, Job Plumbar, Robert Alford. I think all those guys are going to improvement this year. They're pretty good fits for his team, and we'll see because the schemes. No offense to those, but exact high IQ players, I think they'll benefit from being able to really play fast and Smorg, do you think our youngers the lack of development was more about teaching or misidentification?
I think it was completely about coaching. Completely about coaching. Let's put a guy who's only ever played three technique his entire career as a seven technique weak side defensive end. Because that's brilliant. That's really where he wins. Sure, you can get good performances out of guys playing out of the wrong spot, Aaron. You can get them. But you can't get great performances out of players unless they're playing in their perfect role. Unless they're playing in their best spot. If Jonathan Babineau had been playing the three technique and solely the three technique the last 2 years, he has a much, much bigger impact than what he's shown. If you're starting Jonathan Massaquoi at weak side defensive end, basically weak side defensive end, because let's be honest here, Atlanta didn't run a fucking 3-4. So, yeah, it's completely about lack of coaching. And thank God Dan Quinn has come out and basically said, we're going to play guys where they win. We're going to play guys in the spots that fit them best. Because Mike Smith's a moron.
You know, I have a different. It has to do that. I think coaching was a factor. To dismiss coaching as a factor, but I think a lot of it was misidentified talent. I do Falcons put a lot of late round talent. And in air quotes, basically you had a bunch of players that had talent to average NFL, and they basically be average. And I think that's the reasons why the team struggled, particularly defensive side of the ball. You can't build a good defense with players. I just think a lot of was part of it. But that's something that Scott probably will never.
You can build an above average defense with average talent. But you need at least average talent at every single spot. And Atlanta didn't have that at edge rusher. And they didn't have it at coverage linebacker. So they're not going to look great as a defense. They didn't have it at cornerback for half the season because Robert Alford broke his arm. So they've got the talent, but as of now, they've got to, one, to stay healthy, and two, listen to Coach Quinn. Let him do his thing.
Okay. Evan Burns, great coach.
I'd give him an A so far. He said all the right things, done all the right things. It feels a lot like 2008 when Mike Smith first came in, although Mike Smith has the excitement factor of a wet towel. But, there's still... Coach Quinn makes you want to go play for him. I'll put it that way. You sit here and you go, man, I wish I had a helmet I could go strap up and throw some pads on and go play for the Falcons right now. And players see that. Atlanta might sign a free agent too that people aren't expecting them to sign this offseason because Dan Quinn's here. And he gives that feel about him.
Yeah, A+. All right. Poet 2012 asked in the TD Combine video, they talked about a meeting with Blunt in 2 hours. I believe they were free. What do you think? If I is talking about that video, it was basically Quinn and TD talking. about the comment or whatever, and he was about to through it. That was flying into the Indian. Everybody else had gotten, and that he was the famous house or semi. And
I
that he was
still,
bringing a couple other guys.
I still haven't seen the video, so
So
I'll reserve judgment until then.
well, my interpretation was it was because you can't free agents at this point. That is, tampering. You talk to the actual free agent. My perception was talking a couple of other guys I was referring to was like Rich McKay and the people that work for the Falcons. That and it wasn't anything like that. Maybe I missed it, but that's kind of mine. So I think being a little bit street pop. Oh, let's talk. Keeps talking about players who beyond verbally. How is it that this new breed leads to a more energetic camp and team?
I think it's everything that Mike Smith was hoping his players would be, but the fact of the matter is Mike Smith is not a motivating coach, so players aren't going to show that. This new breed of player or energy and drive hasn't really seemed to be an issue around Atlanta, but I think they might have guys who are a little bit nastier on the field. They're not gonna go out there and get these guys who have beat their wives. They're not gonna go out there and get these guys who have, murdered people and, gotten assault raps and that kind of stuff. They're still not gonna do that. So anybody who's hoping for that, I don't understand why, but anybody who's hoping for that, just don't expect it. That being said, anger on the field, good guys off the field, excited about football. He just wants guys who love the game because they love the game. The best example I can give you right now is Sean Weatherspoon. He wants 53 guys who have that anger, excitement, just tenacity on the field that Sean Weatherspoon has. And that off the field, just leadership and good example and good role model that Sean Weatherspoon is. That's what he wants. Give the Falcons 53 of those guys, and Dan Quinn will be an ecstatic man.
I believer that the new coach helps the team short term. I don't, sort of normal hype when a new coach comes in. I think being more successful than they were. I needed to probably 2, 3 more wins this upcoming season. So I players tend to respond to that. I think early success. Question is from Andrew Shearer. As the Broncos, when they went and brought in all those agents and spent a ton of money, one, would you guys do this year with our defense? And second, do the Falcons have the ability, because they did bring in some great names that refer to the Broncos?
He's referring to last year when the Broncos had $30 million in cap space heading into free agency. Sounds very similar to Atlanta's situation. The Broncos also had $50 million the next year, $70 million the year after, $80 million the year after. So they've got a future cap projected with a lot of space to fill. Sounds like Atlanta. Atlanta's got the ability to do that. If they really wanted to go out and get a bunch of free agents, they could do it. But first things first, you got to re-sign Weatherspoon. You got to re-sign Lowry. And then you got to, and I hate myself for saying this, you got to re-sign either OC or Croy to a 1-year, like, veteran minimum deal.
Okay.
Like, that's the first 3 things you got to do. Now, after those deals are done, then you really worry about the rest of the team and go, what's out there in free agency? There's a lot of good players. Let's go and just looking into free agency and seeing what's out there. At defensive end, you might be able to sign 2 guys at defensive end. You know, Jerry Hughes, Brandon Graham types. At defensive tackle, you're not getting big free agent defensive tackle. At outside linebacker, you're not going to bring in a big guy, but you'll bring in, like, Malcolm Smith and Bruce Carter. At inside linebacker, you'll bring in, like, Nate Irving from the Broncos, who's solid depth. At cornerback, you can bring in, I don't know, Tremont Williams or Chris Culliver. Well, you don't want to bring in Culliver. Not with the San Francisco of the South being Atlanta. But, no, like Walter Thurman, you bring him in. At safety, if you don't want lower, you can make a run at Devin McCourty, and that could be your big free agent. So, Atlanta could go out and do that for the defense. They've got the money to go out and do that. The question is whether they actually go out and do that. But if they want to, they can. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. You know, the Broncos went out and signed DeMarco Ware. They went out and TJ Ward. They went out and got Aqib Talib, if I'm not mistaken. And from one perspective, there aren't any defenses, or there are few free agents like that. Even Suttable, some of these key safety class, everybody's hoping that Devin McCourty is out. Aaron Maxwell, Aqib Talib, and he's arguably the best free out there. And I there are some, but I think we're going to be snatched up before they hit. So I mean, it's basically, you know, Falcons can spend money, but I don't think it's a situation like the Broncos. I don't think it should be like the Broncos were in the Super Bowl. They were basically, you know, a good pass deep from, you know, getting up the Falcons in that position. So I see the reason why, you know, you should spend a whole bunch of money. No team has successfully been built in free agency. I just think up in and we got to fix all these problems in free agency, and you know, probably 8 of the time it doesn't work out. You look at the Broncos, it didn't work in favor. You know, team really do a whole lot. It was pretty good, but he, you know, was good, but he wasn't great. It was for the Broncos. So, you know, that's one situation. If the Falcons feel compelled to go out and don't do it. It's not worth it. It's never been worth it. That's one of the things that we've learned. 20-plus years of free agency is in the NFL. Spending a ton of trying to team in the NFL. So, Bill has a couple of more questions. Doing free agency, he asks to bet all on this prediction. Who do we get?
Malcolm Smith. If I'm betting all my money, I'm going on the sure thing.
Let's go. So,
I think we lost Aaron for a second there. We might have to delay the rest of this Falcons mailbag to next week. Just give me a second. He's been having issues with his internet, so there he is.
Yes.
I think you got kind of booted for a second there, sir.
Weather. Yes, I did. I'm gonna. So that's my excuse.
Let's just save the rest of these till next week when your internet connection is not dying on you. Because there's about a dozen here. I don't mind spending a full week on these questions. Some of them are inspiring ideas for next week's show. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Folks, if you have questions and more for field, right, you can, we'll get you. But for tonight, as for the difficult, we'll sure show more back. Use the hashtag Mailbag. Use the channel he's writing for report profile stuff. Plenty of stuff for free. You can find me on falcons.com, Falcons on, and that's our show this week.
And apologies for cutting it short, but I'm hoping that next week we don't have any technical difficulties like we did this week. I was having trouble hearing Aaron, and it wasn't working very well. So, all right. We'll see you next week.